Merry Christmas and welcome back to my Christmas series throughout the month of December. I'm sorry I couldn't upload anything last week. I came down with a real bad sickness and that just knocked me out for the whole week. But I'm back now and let's talk about another Christmas movie that's not quite your typical Christmas movie. Gremlins. So Gremlins came out in 1984, was directed by Joe Dante, and is the story of Billy, played by Zach Galligan, and he's your average small town guy. He's artistic, he's got big dreams, and he's got a nice girlfriend played by Phoebe Cates, but he works at the bank, and he's a little down on his luck, and his dad one day comes home and he brings him a pet. It's this little creature in a box, and it's a mogwai, and the mogwai is the Gremlins, but the cute version, and this one's name is Gizmo, and Gizmo's voiced by Howie Mandel. And I gotta get this out of the way, Gizmo is one of the most adorable creatures ever put on a screen ever. Well, that is until Baby Groot and then Grogu with The Mandalorian. So Disney, has been really trying to overshadow Gizmo for some time, but Gizmo was the original cutest thing ever because he's just adorable. He's little, he's furry, he's got big expressive eyes, he's an animatronic, you just want to cuddle him. And he's also well behaved, he understands the rules, he doesn't get into trouble, he's the good gremlin. But like I alluded to, there are rules when it comes to taking care of gremlins. There's 3 rules. Rule number 1, keep him out of sunlight. Sunlight will kill him. Any kind of bright light is deadly to them, so keep them in the dark. Rule number 2, don't get them wet. If they get wet, they multiply like crazy. All these little puffballs start coming off and it's just madness, so don't get them wet. And rule number 3, don't feed them after midnight, because if you do, that's when all hell breaks loose. They eat, they get into a food coma, and they create these mucky, gross cocoon things that look like alien eggs. And then what used to be a kind of adorable gremlin turns into these gross reptilian evil-looking gremlins. So of course, Billy, being the upstanding guy that he is, follows all these rules perfectly, no problems happen, him and Gizmo live happily ever after. Well, that would make a very boring movie if that were the case. But Billy, to his credit, tries to follow these rules the best he can, and the whole water thing wasn't even really his fault. It was actually Corey Feldman dropped some water on Gizmo's back, and Gizmo started multiplying, and now we've got a whole litter of much less well-behaved gremlins. And it's weird because I always assumed that it was when they made their cocoons, that's when they turned evil and malicious. But really, from their creation, from the moment that they popped off of Gizmo's back, some of these gremlins already like getting into a bit of mischief, and especially Stripe. And Stripe kind of becomes the leader of these gremlins, and he's got this nice little mohawk thing in the middle of his head. So really, it's not the cocoons that turn him evil. They already have this evil in them that I guess was technically in Gizmo all along, but he kind of keeps it in check or something, and it just comes out whenever he gives birth. That's a theory for you. But it's not bad enough that we have all these extra gremlins running around. They also tricked Billy into defeating them after midnight by unplugging his alarm clock, so now the time is just 11 something forever, and he didn't realize how late it was, and he had already fed them. So then they make their cocoons and turn into this monstrosity. And this is really where the movie starts having a lot of fun with its premise, and the Christmas atmosphere really kind of takes hold. Because imagine all the elves from something like Arthur Christmas. In Arthur Christmas, the elves really did all the work and Santa was just kind of a figurehead. Imagine those elves that are busting in and out of houses, doing all the stealth things and tying up presents and, being expertly efficient at what they're doing. Imagine if they looked like this and had the attitude to match. And that's basically what the best parts in Gremlins are. It's when the Gremlins are hiding out in the houses, causing mischief, eating Christmas lights, tying up dogs, killing old ladies. And the ways Joe Dante chooses to visually show the Gremlins and the mischief that they cause and the trouble they get into are some of the most memorable scenarios I can think of. One that pops right into my mind immediately is when the mom comes downstairs and finds a Gremlin in the kitchen just causing all kinds of problems, throwing knives and stuff, and she traps him in the microwave and hits start, and the thing just blows up in the microwave. It's kind of gross, but kind of cool at the same time. And yeah, there is quite a bit of gremlin gore in this movie. There's not a lot of gore for like the human characters or really any of the animals or anything. That's pretty tame. But when it comes to the gremlins themselves, there's all kinds of blood and guts squirting every which way when these things are getting killed. And let me remind you that this is a PG movie, but this is 80s PG at its peak, because there's nothing in here that I don't think a kid can't sit through over the age of like 10. They'll be fine. It's not that bad. The gremlins look pretty fake, so there's nothing that's going to traumatize them. And I think that is because the gremlins' blood is not red blood. It's this weird greenish blue kind of color. And if the MPAA is consistent on anything, it's that red blood is rated R and any other color blood is PG or even G at times. And Gremlins is just a perfect test case for this. And even though this is not a typical Christmas movie or one that I really grew up with, I didn't watch Gremlins until I was much older. I was like a teenager when I finally saw Gremlins. And even then I didn't really associate it with the holidays right away, because my introduction to Gremlins is actually Gremlins 2, and I love Gremlins 2. I think it's hilarious. And I saw that because it just happened to be on a cable channel, and it was the movie of the night, and I was like, oh, Gremlins 2, let's watch it. And I saw it, and I loved it. I laughed so hard at it. And again, I was a little bit older. I was around teenage years, so I got a lot of the meta humor that's in that movie, and I thought it was one of the most self-aware movies to ever come out before Deadpool. And then it wasn't until a few years after seeing that movie where I finally got around to seeing the original. And the original is good. Do I love it as much as Gremlins 2? Do I think it's as funny as Gremlins 2 or as clever? Not always. I think Gremlins 1 plays it very safe, and that's what I can say. It's good, it's well made, the puppets are realistic enough, the comedy is there for the most part. The only thing is that after seeing Gremlins 2 and knowing how fast and furious the pace of comedy is in that movie, coming back to Gremlins 1, it seems to move a bit slower. And while it's still good and it's well made, it treats itself more as a horror comedy than a spoof comedy that was the sequel. And watching it again, I realized just how well some of these horror elements do work, because you know that the comedy with the Gremlins is going to work because you have these ridiculous little creature puppets running around a small town that looks like it was a mix between the town from E.T. and Hill Valley from Back to the Future, so it's got this very nostalgic feel to it. But this movie does have some very serious horror moments, like the scenes with the science teacher and the gremlin when he's got his little lethal injection. That's some legitimate suspense, and how it's shot is very clever. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of the suspense in Jurassic Park with the velociraptors, which is kind of a weird comparison, but the way it's shot, the way it's paced, is very similar to that. And then the moment that I think everybody remembers, because I feel like this is the one that may have scarred quite a few children back in the day, and that's the gremlin in the tree. That is such an effective jump scare, and there is some blood in that scene where you see the cuts and it is bleeding, and it's very intense in that moment. And that scene is a perfect example of how well balanced the horror and comedy is in this movie, because if you think about it on paper, the idea of a gremlin disguised as a Christmas tree, hiding in a Christmas tree that just jump scares somebody and attacks them, that's an inherently funny idea. But the way Joe Dante shoots it, and the sound design and the special effects, it all comes together for a kind of horrifying moment. And I think it's that synthesis of horror and comedy that makes Gremlins endure year after year with so many people. But then there's one thing in this movie that I don't know how to make of it. Is it a joke? Is it played seriously? Are we supposed to laugh? And it's Kate's traumatic Christmas backstory, because throughout most of the movie you see her and she's all uptight about Christmas. She doesn't really celebrate it. She's very anti-Christmas the whole holiday. She's basically the Grinch of the town, aside from the old lady in the beginning of the movie, who's definitely a reference of Miss Gulch from The Wizard of Oz. But Kate finally gets fed up with Billy asking her all these questions about why she hates Christmas, and she gives a pretty ridiculous and incredibly dark story about the year that she found out there was no Santa Claus. It goes that one year her dad dressed up as Santa Claus and actually went down the chimney, to commit to the bit, and he got stuck and died and burned up in this horrible way. The fire department came and they had to rescue him, but it was too late and he died, and that's how she found out that there was no Santa Claus. And this story kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's told through this monologue that she's giving very well. I mean, Phoebe Cates does a really good job acting this scene, and you do buy it. But at the same time, you're like, is this a joke? Like, are we supposed to be laughing at how out of left field this story is and how it grinds the movie to a halt for a couple minutes while she lets out this really intense monologue, and then everything just moves on as if nothing happens? And so the story really doesn't amount to much aside from explaining why she hates Christmas so much. And I guess I wouldn't be analyzing this so much if the sequel didn't try to make a joke of this scene too. Because in the sequel, another holiday, Abe Lincoln's birthday, comes up and she starts going into this same monologue about how she hates Lincoln's birthday, and there was this guy with a beard, a top hat, and they just cut her off. They don't even let her finish the story. And that's hilarious because it just shows how weird and kind of out of place it was in this movie. So I still don't really know what to make of it. I think it's kind of funny when you watch the two movies back to back and you understand the full arc of this joke. But watching this movie on its own, it just kind of feels a little weird and, again, grinds the movie to a halt for a few minutes. But as you might expect, they do end up finding a way to destroy all these gremlins, and the idea is that you corral them all in this movie theater and then blow up the theater, which now I'm wondering if Quentin Tarantino might have been inspired by this movie when he was coming up with his climax, Operation Kino, because that is a very similar plan. But maybe it's just a coincidence. But after all that's done, there's still one gremlin left standing, and it's Stripe, the leader of the evil gremlins. And they track him to this toy store where he's holed up, and there's all these fun little toy shenanigans. But ultimately, Stripe is defeated by the sun. The sun comes in, and he melts. And this may be one of the, if not the most gruesome gremlin death in the movie. I don't know, the microwave one is still pretty gruesome. But this one takes quite a bit longer because he melts. And when I say he melts, I mean every layer, every bit of skin, of muscle, of bone all just drips off. And the whole time he's moving around, he's screaming, he's being all gross and goopy until the end comes and there's nothing left but a couple bones and a puddle. But given all the havoc and chaos that Stripe has orchestrated throughout this whole movie, you don't really feel too bad. But the thing in this movie that really does set it apart for me when I think about Christmas or Christmas adjacent movies, which I would consider this Christmas adjacent. It's not inherently Christmas, but there are enough things in it that do remind me of the holiday. And even on a thematic level, Gizmo is given as a Christmas present and he's got to learn responsibility. It's not that much unlike A Christmas Story, where, he's got to learn responsibility with his BB gun. But what sets this movie apart is that it really doesn't have a happy ending. The old man from Chinatown comes back at the end, and he's the one that sold Billy's dad the Gizmo in the first place. He comes into the house right when you think everything's wrapping up, and he demands Gizmo come back with him because Billy did not show enough maturity or responsibility with a Mogwai, so he doesn't deserve him. So the old man takes Gizmo away, and that's that. And the one glimmer of hope is that maybe someday Billy will grow up a bit more and be more responsible and deserve a pet like Gizmo in the future. But that day is not today. And the movie kind of ends on this kind of bittersweet note where you know that it kind of sucks that his Christmas present got taken away, and he really developed a relationship with that little guy, so it's hard to see him leave. But at the same time, you're thinking, with all the chaos and death and destruction that's been caused during this holiday season, maybe it is a good idea that the Mogwai stay away, because it's just too dangerous. There's too much risk involved. And at the end of the day, I respect a movie that can give us that hard love lesson, where, sometimes we're not the most responsible, and sometimes we don't deserve the best or the shiniest, or the cutest, and we just kind of have to live with that. We have to work on ourselves to earn that in the future. And that's Gremlins. Is it a staple of the holiday for me? Is it a movie that I watch every year around the holidays? No, not really. But does that make it bad? Absolutely not. It's a perfectly fine film. It's fine to throw on if you got kids around the age of, 10 to 16. They're going to love it. They're going to laugh when they're supposed to laugh. They're going to be startled or suspensed when they're supposed to be. It's very effective. It's covered in holiday cheer. If you want to pop it in during December or any time between Thanksgiving and New Year's, go for it, have fun. And now that I'm finally on the tail end of this sickness that's been holding me hostage this past week, I can finally start delivering you guys some more unorthodox Christmas movies. So stay tuned for that, but for now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about Gremlins? Actually, which one do you like better, Gremlins or Gremlins 2? I haven't really seen what people think about these movies. I'm personally a bigger fan of Gremlins 2, but let me know whatever you think in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby, this is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.